that cream goes, that begins creating something some very interesting patterns. Yeah, so the patterns of becoming created by chaotic attractors are the most interesting visually. Nevertheless, these are just the attractors that have been discovered so far. Point attractors discovered in 1900. Periodic attractors discovered in 1930 by a Dutch scientist called Van der Pol. Chaotic attractors discovered in the 1930s, 1900s, 1960s. So like everything that we've been studying in class, these things have dates. I want you to look at that. This is not something that someone thought, like the negation of the negation. These are patterns of synthesis that have been discovered at a particular point in time. That's why it makes them attractive to me.
Can I start? These points, the first point basically, because the other ones, I don't know, it's fluid dynamic and image. Can we say that Lacan, for the space of the, okay, not unconscious, but perhaps the whole experience, like that, according to these points of Capiton?
Yeah, in
points.
fact, he used this one because he was studying what he called the fourth da. There's a kid that kept repeating fourth da, fourth da, fourth da, and he was caught in this obsessive repetition of the same. And one of his most famous examples of wanting to study mental dynamics by observing the symptoms of obsessive people was this kid that kept repeating, I can't remember the language that those belong to, fourth da. I don't know if it's German or what it is, but he was just a kid that kept repeating fourth da, fourth da, fourth da. And you smack him and stuff, and the guy would just go back to fourth da, you know. I hope that he didn't smack him, but he probably did smack him because Lacan had a bad temper. That would be a periodic attractor in the dynamics of a certain portion of his brain. Clearly, this would never capture a whole brain, but it could capture certain part of the circuitry of certain aspects, certain organs in the brain, and then cause a behavior that is repetitive, compulsively repetitive.
Yeah, but wouldn't be keeping a world of signifiers?
Well, he thought so, but now today we can render Lacan's findings without signifiers. After all, he was borrowing from topology. He's the first one who started saying, the Baromean knot, and it's a kind of knot that's the connections of the unconscious and the conscious part and so on. So if he started using topological concepts, we can now turn this against him and say, look, you want to use topology? Use the real topology of Henri Poincaré, and you'll see that a fourth da, an obsessive compulsive repetition, can be explained without signifiers, purely dynamically, with the aid of immanent patterns of becoming, immanent patterns of change. Okay, so Deleuze saw that. By the early 1960s, this was perfectly clear. Chaotic attractors were already discovered. René Thom was creating catastrophe theory, where he would explain not only the attractors, but how you go from one attractor to the other attractor, changes between attractors. The whole thing started getting much more complete, much more exciting than at the time when Henri Poincaré began this investigation. 60 years had gone by and had paid off. Deleuze immediately saw, but this is what I need. This is what I need to conceive that immanent spiritual plane, that the most important thing of which is that it does not resemble anything in this world. That it's made out of purely topological points and circles and twisted shapes and so on, but that when they become actualized, when they become part of this world, what becomes actual doesn't resemble them at all. The soap bubble doesn't resemble a point, the salt cube crystal doesn't resemble a point, the radio transmitter doesn't resemble a loop. There's something in their behavior that suggests it, and of course, remember that Deleuze wants everything to be divergent, so the world remains open. These things are divergent. Every phase space has hundreds of different realizations. Here I only drew one cube, but crystals come in all kinds of shapes. dodecahedrons, octahedrons, tetrahedrons, well, all of them minimize bonding energy. So I could right now add in here, just to show you how divergent this spiritual entity, this point attractor, this immanent spiritual entity, can give matter the ability to generate spheres, the ability to generate cubes, the ability to generate dodecahedrons, tetrahedrons, and so on. Remember what we were saying before. The matter of transcendental thinkers is a matter that's inert, that cannot generate anything. So what we needed to explain is, once you take God out of the picture, a transcendent personal God, that is giving commands, let there be bubbles, let there be light rays, let there be crystals. Once you take it out of the picture, what are we replacing with? With a spirituality that explains those capacities of matter. Right? That explains the fact that matter can create bubbles spontaneously, matter can create cubic forms spontaneously, tetrahedrons, dodecahedrons, and so on, out of one and the same topological point. The same thing with cycles. Everything in nature that cycles, from fireflies cycling to laser beams pulsating, to anything that pulsates and vibrates or oscillates in nature with a perfect beat, has a periodic attractor in its space of possibilities. Okay? So, which means that this number of arrows is incredibly divergent. And for Deleuze, divergence is crucial because it's what keeps the world open.
What does Deleuze say about entropy?
Well, entropy would be, of course, the point at which the energy you need to use has been exhausted, or to put it in the same way, entropy, remember that when we were talking about intensive thinking, we said intensive differences drive flows. As long as there's hot and cold, you can drive a process in the atmosphere, say. As long as there's low pressure and high pressure, you can drive a process. When hot and cold become all warm, that's entropy.
Right, but isn't that a point of convergence?
Well, it's another attractor. You're absolutely right. It's the death attractor, if you want to put it that way. It's the attractor that represents death. Because when your body dies, that's when when all those oscillators in your body have stopped oscillating, when your heart has stopped beating, when you take your pulse and your temperature now has gone way down and you're really cold, well, that is the point of maximum entropy for you. All your intensive differences have been cancelled. Or even is the death of a storm, the death of a cloud. The moment the intensive differences, the moment hot and cold become uniformly warm, that's entropy. There's no more energy to drive the process, and therefore the process is dead. This is why intensive differences have to be kept alive. If the sun didn't shine every day on us to revive those intensive differences, then this planet would die. This planet would reach the final death attractor, which is entropy.
Zero intensity, right?
The point of zero intensity, or at least the zero differences in intensity.
When your body dies, a whole bunch of new processes start. And how is that?
Oh, but then those would be now, yes, absolutely right. There is, in fact, not everything in your body becomes entropic. There are parts that are still usable, and that's what the worms and so on that eat you use. What they do is disintegrate you and put those minerals back into the soil, so then plants can use them to feed themselves. And so yes, you're absolutely right. When you die, it's not a point of maximum entropy, but nevertheless, when you measure the degree of order between you alive and dancing and you dead, there is definitely an enormous loss of order, right? An enormous loss of dynamism. But you're right. A few attractors are still there. A few differences are still there. Otherwise the worms that eat you wouldn't even want you. I mean, they would go like, "What the hell is that food, man? That's not even good for lunch. I don't want to eat this guy." But you're right. You still have minerals. You still have crystals at an atomic level. They still keep their order. The iron in your hemoglobin, for instance, the iron in your blood is still usable. So bacteria can come in, or worms